Threaten my friend with revenge porn? I'll ruin your whole damn life in 45 minutes. Let me tell you the story of how I completely obliterated a guy's life in under an hour because he thought he could get away with threatening my best friend with revenge porn. Spoiler alert, he was dead wrong. It's funny how quickly things can change when someone decides to mess with the wrong person. And when my best friend Sarah came to me with a threat like that hanging over her head, I knew there was no way I was going to let him get away with it. He thought he was being slick, hiding behind screens and anonymity, but let's just say, I've got a lot more resources than he ever anticipated. He was about to realize, the hard way, that making one wrong move could unravel everything he thought he had under control. This all started with my best friend, Sarah. She's one of the most intelligent, level-headed, and trustworthy people I know, but like anyone, she's not immune to making mistakes. And let's be honest, who hasn't made a couple of questionable decisions in their younger years? We all have. Sarah met this guy online, a guy who seemed harmless at first, just another charming guy on the internet, saying all the right things, telling her she was different, that she was special. He seemed normal, even down to earth. And they connected over their shared interests. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just harmless chatting. He wasn't some predator hiding in the shadows. Or so it seemed. After a few weeks of talking, things got a little more personal, and Sarah felt comfortable enough to share some intimate photos with him. Nothing crazy, nothing that would be deemed too much, just pictures she thought would stay between her and someone she trusted. She had no reason to believe this guy was anything but what he appeared to be. She was just trying to enjoy herself, trust someone, and have fun. Little did she know, she was handing him the keys to the very thing that would be used to threaten her. But like a lot of things, what seemed like harmless fun at first quickly spiraled out of control. Sarah started noticing more and more red flags. Small things at first, a comment here, a message there, that made her uneasy. At first, she brushed them off. Maybe she was overthinking it, right? But as time went on, the warning signs grew louder. He started to get possessive, asking for more pictures, telling her what to wear, how to pose, what kind of pictures he wanted. She politely pushed back, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. And then, there were the comments. The comments that made her skin crawl. He was crossing boundaries. It was no longer about fun or flirting, it was about control, and he was pushing her to do things she wasn't comfortable with. When he started pushing for them to meet in person, something in her gut told her it was time to pull back. She didn't feel safe, she didn't feel like she knew him the way she thought she did. And that's when she backed out. She told him that she wasn't interested in meeting, that she didn't feel comfortable anymore. That was when the mask finally slipped. That's when the asshole showed his true colors. He didn't take no for an answer. He was furious, enraged even, that Sarah wasn't going to meet him, that she didn't want to go along with his demands. And that's when he started with the threats. He sent her a message telling her that if she didn't follow through, he would leak the intimate photos she had shared. He threatened to expose everything, to ruin her reputation, to destroy her privacy. He thought this would be enough to force her to comply, that she would buckle under the pressure and give in. But that's where he made his first mistake. You see, when you mess with my people, you're not just messing with them, you're messing with me. And when Sarah came to me, I knew exactly what I needed to do. This guy had no idea who he was dealing with. Now, I'm an attorney, and I've seen my fair share of bad situations. I deal with complicated, high-stakes cases all the time, so trust me when I say that this wasn't my first rodeo. I've handled everything from corporate malfeasance to criminal cases, and I know how to handle people who think they can get away with things. The moment Sarah told me about the threat, I knew I was going to bring this guy down, not just legally, but professionally, personally, every single part of his life would crumble. He was going to feel the weight of his mistake. I didn't need to panic, I didn't need to get emotional, I needed to be methodical, precise, and ruthless. And that's exactly what I was going to do. I didn't waste any time. The first thing I did was gather all the evidence I could find. Every photo he sent, every message he wrote, every little detail I could use. I knew I needed to be thorough, because once I had everything, there would be no getting out of it. I wasn't going to let this creep off easy. The more I looked, the more disgusted I became. But I didn't let that cloud my judgment. I knew how to focus, how to find the key pieces that would bring him down. I started with the basics, the small stuff, the photos, the messages, the metadata, anything that could give me a clue about where this guy was or who he was. One of the pictures he'd sent stood out, a simple photo of himself in a branded polo shirt. At first, it just seemed like a throwaway detail, something that was irrelevant. But something clicked in my head. I recognized the logo. It wasn't some random shirt, it was from a company, and that logo wasn't just something he bought off the rack. It was distinctive. I knew right then and there this was my key to cracking the case wide open. I followed his online handle, which led me to his TikTok account. That didn't give me much, though. TikTok's full of generic usernames and nonsense videos, so it wasn't a goldmine of information. But I wasn't deterred. I dug deeper and eventually linked his TikTok to his Instagram account. That's when I struck gold. His real name was there, and it wasn't hidden or disguised. It was right there, in black and white. His full name, no aliases, no tricks. This guy wasn't as clever as he thought he was. From there, it only took a few more minutes to find his LinkedIn profile. His job was listed, his company, his position, it was all there, and I couldn't believe how easy it was. The photo he'd sent of himself in that branded polo shirt was proof enough that he worked for this company. At this point, I was starting to connect the dots, and I could feel the pressure building. I wasn't just going to send a nasty email or make a few phone calls. No, this guy was going to pay, and I was going to make sure it was absolute. I knew exactly what to do with the information I had. I moved on to his LinkedIn profile. His job was listed, and that gave me everything I needed. I was able to cross-reference the photo he sent of himself wearing that branded polo shirt, and it all matched up. Now, I had a name, an employer, a place of work, and a picture that confirmed it all. The threads of his life were unraveling, and I was only getting started. But I wasn't stopping there. I kept digging, looking for more evidence, more links to his professional life. And sure enough, I found them. I dug up pictures of his motorcycle, his pride and joy, and there it was, the license plate number. That was gold. With that plate number, I could now figure out where he lived. And let me tell you, there's nothing more satisfying than knowing exactly where your enemy sleeps. Now that I had all the ammunition I needed, I went in for the kill. I didn't just send him a threatening text or a warning. No, I went straight for his employer. I crafted an email that laid everything out. I wasn't subtle. I included screenshots of his threats, the photos he had sent Sarah, the images of his motorcycle with the license plate number, everything. I made sure to include his work details, his company, his position, everything. That would make his employer sit up and take notice. I also made sure to include the explicit details of his conversations, showing how he had crossed lines at work. The whole thing was a bombshell. I wasn't just telling them that he was dangerous, I was showing them, piece by piece, how he had exposed himself. He had made so many mistakes. And this wasn't just about his job. I made sure they knew that I would be forwarding all of this to local law enforcement. And then I added the kicker, I was going to the FBI. Since Sarah is a U.S. citizen and he had threatened her while she was on U.S. soil, these were federal crimes. He wasn't going to get away with it. But here's where things got really interesting. I didn't just stop with his employer. I knew he was planning a trip to the U.S. soon, and that's when I stepped up the game. I made sure his employer knew that I would be forwarding the entire file to law enforcement and the FBI. I also made sure they understood that, since he was planning to travel to the U.S., I would ensure that law enforcement would be waiting for him when he landed. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. I wasn't just talking about a few petty legal threats, I was talking about real consequences. And to make sure that everything would hit him hard, I let them know that the FBI would be aware of his situation the moment he set foot on U.S. soil. It wasn't just a personal matter anymore, it was now a full-on legal disaster. The authorities wouldn't let him slip through the cracks, not after I gave them everything they needed. I had a solid connection in the U.S. Attorney's office, an assistant U.S. attorney I went to law school with, and I wasn't shy about making sure his name would be on the radar of everyone who mattered. I knew exactly how to get their attention, and I wasn't going to waste that opportunity. The wheels were already in motion. This guy thought he could hide in the shadows, but the moment I got involved, those shadows started to shrink. Fast. As if that wasn't enough, I also had his license plate number. And with that, I knew exactly where he lived. No more guessing, no more running from his actions. I had a clear address, and I wasn't going to leave any stone unturned. The moment I had that piece of information, I started reaching out to local authorities in his area, letting them know exactly what was going on. He thought his anonymity would keep him safe, but I made sure the people who needed to know were fully aware of the situation. I even provided the local cops with the same detailed information I'd shared with his employer, everything from the threats he'd made to the explicit content he had shared, right down to the motorcycle pictures. It wasn't just about making him face the consequences, it was about ensuring that every single person who could take action would have the full picture, no questions asked. I wanted them to understand just how deep his actions went and just how far-reaching the impact could be. The more I kept digging into his life, the more it became clear that he had no idea what he was dealing with. While he thought he could just disappear into the background, hoping that Sarah would be too scared to fight back, I had already exposed his entire life. His career, his reputation, his personal life, everything was laid out, exposed. He had underestimated how far I was willing to go, and that was a mistake he'd never recover from. Every corner he tried to hide in, I found a way to turn it over. Every piece of information he thought was private became another weapon in my arsenal. At the time, but I didn't stop there. I made sure that Sarah knew she wasn't alone in this fight. I kept her in the loop, explaining every step of the process so she could understand how her safety and peace of mind were at the top of my priority list. It wasn't just about taking this guy down, it was about making sure Sarah felt protected, supported, and empowered. I wasn't going to let her walk this road alone. She was the victim, but I wasn't going to let her feel powerless in the face of someone who had tried to ruin her life. It was my job to make sure he paid for his actions in every possible way, and I would make sure every agency, every institution, and every person who could hold him accountable knew exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. In the end, it took me less than 45 minutes to completely destroy this guy's life. His career? Gone. His reputation? Shattered. His freedom? On the line. He thought he could play some game from behind a screen, threatening my best friend and hiding behind a false sense of security. But when it came down to it, he had no idea who he was dealing with. In the blink of an eye, everything he had worked for collapsed around him. All it took was one mistake, one malicious decision to think he could make Sarah's life hell. And in the time it took him to hit send on his last threat, I had already made sure his world was falling apart. If you're out there thinking you can get away with threatening someone, thinking you can hide behind your anonymity and your screens, think again. People like me are out there, and we won't stop until you face the full consequences of your actions. You mess with the wrong person, and I promise you, the last thing you'll be doing is hiding. You'll be too busy trying to figure out how everything you've built falls apart in the blink of an eye. You won't even have time to think of an escape plan before everything comes crashing down. This guy learned the hard way that you can't just hide behind a fake name and threats. You have to face what you do, no matter how hard you try to avoid it. Remath of it all was swift and absolute. Within hours of my email hitting his employer's inbox, I received confirmation that they had launched their own internal investigation into his actions. They were already aware of some of his questionable behavior, but my email pushed them over the edge. They began gathering more information, verifying everything I had shared, and preparing to take action. By the end of the day, I was told that he had been placed on immediate leave, pending further investigation. As I sat there, knowing that this guy's career was effectively over, I couldn't help but feel a certain satisfaction. He thought he could control the narrative, manipulate the situation, and use his threats as leverage. But the tables had turned, and now he was the one caught in the crosshairs. Meanwhile, local authorities were already investigating the situation on his end, looking into any previous actions that might have indicated a pattern of behavior. They took the threats seriously, and with the evidence I provided, they began reaching out to other people who had interacted with him, anyone who could provide more details. They were also looking into his personal life, trying to piece together how deep his lies went. No longer was he the untouchable man hiding behind a screen. He was a criminal facing a mountain of evidence. The FBI, of course, was taking their time to prepare their case. The beauty of federal investigations is that they don't rush, but when they come for you, they come hard. Since the threats were made while Sarah was a U.S. citizen on U.S. soil, it had become a federal crime. The Bureau had everything it needed to move forward with charges against him. And they would. It was just a matter of time. They even made sure to inform me that they were ready to execute their plans to intercept him when he arrived in the U.S. Everything was lined up. The guy never knew what hit him. Sarah, while shaken by the events, slowly started to feel safer. She no longer had to worry about the torment of living under the threat of her private images being leaked. It took a while, but she started to get her confidence back. She started to trust again, but she also became more cautious, more aware of the people she allowed into her life. As for me, I wasn't going to let the situation slide just because I had taken care of the immediate problem. I made sure to offer her all the support she needed, both emotionally and legally. And every step of the way, I kept track of what was happening with the case, ensuring that this man's life didn't go back to normal. By the time he was officially notified that his employer had fired him, his world had already begun to disintegrate. The pressure from the FBI and local law enforcement, coupled with the barrage of information that had been uncovered, made him a pariah in his own industry. People started distancing themselves from him, colleagues, acquaintances, even some of his supposed friends. They all realized too late that he had been hiding a darker side. His personal life was in shambles too. He had alienated anyone who could have defended him, and the people he thought he could trust were now avoiding him like the plague. His social media pages became ghost towns, and the once popular TikTok account was taken down by the platform after a series of reports came in. His motorcycle, the same one he flaunted online, was no longer his pride and joy. His every move was being monitored by law enforcement, and they were already in the process of contacting his family, digging into his past to uncover every transgression. The truth was, he had underestimated just how fast things could spiral out of control. He thought that by threatening Sarah, he was simply going to manipulate her into submission. What he didn't anticipate was the sheer wrath he would face when he messed with the wrong person. Now, sitting in the quiet of my office late one night, reflecting on how everything had played out, I felt a deep sense of justice. He had attempted to weaponize fear, to bully someone into compliance. But in the end, his own arrogance and carelessness had become his downfall. There was no escaping what he had done now. Not from law enforcement, not from his company, and certainly not from the ripple effect his actions would have on his personal life. And as for Sarah, she was free. Free from fear, free from worry. She could move on, knowing that she had not only survived the ordeal but had triumphed over it. And for me, there was no greater satisfaction than knowing that justice had been served in the most thorough way possible. I didn't just protect my friend, I destroyed the life of a man who thought he could tear hers apart. So, to anyone out there who thinks they can threaten people with impunity, thinking that they can hide behind anonymity and make someone's life miserable, know this: there are people like me who will not sit by and watch. We won't hesitate to bring you down. We won't just stand by and let you get away with it. We'll expose you for who you truly are, and in doing so, we'll make sure your world crashes down in a way you can't even begin to comprehend. So, if you think your threats are going to work, think again. You don't know who you're dealing with. You won't be able to run, and you'll be left wondering how it all came apart so quickly. Because trust me, it will. And when it does, you won't have anyone left to blame but yourself.